Hi, I'm Bearcroft. In part 3 of the Hedgehog Pyrography tutorial, we're going to be looking at adding colour. In this final part of this 3-part Hedgehog Pyrography tutorial, we're going to talk about adding colour. Now, fundamentally, pyrography is a medium by itself. You're creating line and tone just with the pen, different heats and so on. But people do like to add a little bit of colour, and there's nothing wrong with that. People have been adding colour to pyrography or wood burning for many years, and I think that's fine as long as you don't let the colour take over. Primarily it is a pyrography medium, wood burning on wood, and a little bit of colour is okay, but if you put too much on then it becomes a painting. Lines become crossed. So we're going to look at different media you can use. You can use virtually any media to add colour to your pyrography work. One of those is watercolour, which I'm not going to use today. I'm not a lover of watercolour, and it can be a little bit too temporary for my liking, especially on something like this. First medium we're going to look at is coloured pencil. So ordinary coloured pencil here. Now these work fine on wood anyway, and that will allow you to get quite a lot of control over your colour, the amount of colour, the softness and so on. So I'm going to use this sort of May green, sap green colour for adding a little bit of tone to the background, not too much, okay? Remember, I want to enhance the pyrography, not take away from it. So all I'm doing is just adding a little bit like that into the background, just a very light tone, just to lift our subject, basically, that's all, and provide almost a setting, a natural looking setting. Always make sure, of course, that you've got no varnish on your piece. If you've got varnish on there at all, then you can burn through it, but you can't really add any colour. The colour will just slide all over the place. So let's just take that up just above his nose, and it will automatically lift your subject off the background. So I'm not going to do too much background, just a little hint, just to add a little bit more interest, I think. And as always, don't do too much too soon. So if it's too heavy and you don't like it, then you've got to try and get it all off again. If it's too light, of course, you can add more. So I'm going to stop about here, and then we can just, if you've got some lines in there, if you don't want to see the lines, then you can use a blending tool like this, just to soften it. Okay, make sure that's clean. You don't want to add any graphite or charcoal to it if it's being used for something else, which this has, but I've got a little clean side there, and I can just soften the edges so it disappears or fades into the wood background nice and gently. Okay, so that's the first thing. Also going to use the coloured pencil for part of the leaves, so I'll show you what I mean shortly. So let's put a little hint of the same green into our leaves. Just pressing a little bit harder on this to get a stronger colour. Don't forget, of course, that particularly with something like coloured pencil, which is still going to be erasable, if that's a word, you can still rub it out. So if you want to keep it, make it permanent, make sure you use a spray varnish after you've added your colour. And that's particularly true, of course, with the watercolour. If you're going to use watercolour at all, then make sure you use some spray varnish once that's dried. So the next we're going to look at is ink pen. Okay, it's got these coloured pens, again, which are great for general painting, doodling, or whatever you like, but also for adding colour. So I'm going to use this just to show how it can be used to add a darker tone into our leaves on top of the coloured pencil. A slightly different green maybe on the shadow side and for a little bit of detail. But notice it's still just enhancing the pyrography. I'm not trying to cover up any of the burn marks. I want to keep those. So all the different mediums that I'm using are going to be transparent, which are going to enable us to see the burning through that. If you start to paint heavy acrylic over the top of that and start to lose your lines, your pyrography shading, then it's not going to be really pyrography anymore. It's just there to provide an outline. So we've got that. I've got another same pen, different colour. I use a little bit of pink here. We can put that, for example, on his toes. And of course, these brush pens do give you a lot of control as well. And we'll do a little bit inside his ear, I think. So you can do fine lines with those, and again, with it being transparent, it means we can see our pyrography through that. So the next thing I want to talk about is a wet medium. First of all, we've got acrylic. So I'm going to use just a tiny little bit of acrylic white, this is titanium white, and just put a hint on our bramble flowers there. Now, if this particularly applies to watercolour, if you're going to use a kind of wet paint with water, then you've got to remember that the water is absorbed into the wood and the pigment lays on the surface. So with an acrylic pigment, that's fine, because generally speaking that won't rub off. If it's a watercolour pigment, it's going to be very temporary, and that will undoubtedly rub off, or it'll wash off at least. So let's try that bit first. I'm going to take a little bit of fairly diluted white, not too strong to start with. I don't want it to be too wet either. I want it to be visible, but it wants to go on easily, but without being too heavy. Okay, so let's give that a try. Again, you can always test this on a spare bit of wood to start with. I'll make sure that I can see the underlying pyrography strokes, so I'm just going to wet that a little bit more and make sure it's not too strong. And there we go, and just give a little hint of white to our bramble flowers, and it will dry a little bit fainter anyway, once or a little bit lighter once the water evaporates. Again, just make sure you've got a nice sort of wash of the colour, whatever colour you're using. And if you stay within the lines, then it shouldn't run. In other words, streak. If you've got a particularly grainy bit of wood, you might find that it streaks a little bit. But acrylics are very easy to control, I think. You could use gouache as well, of course. But I think acrylics are very easy to control, and you can use them to paint on virtually anything anyway. Remember, all that matters is just a little hints of colour here and there. Okay, so that's the acrylic. What I also want to talk about is wood stain. Now, wood stain generally, like this, there's little, I don't know if you can see the colour there, brown mahogany it is. Wood stain seems to be the perfect solution for adding colour to your pyrography, and indeed it is. But one thing you've got to remember about wood stain, generally there are solvents, and the solvent will sink into the wood more than water will, and it tends to disperse as it sinks in. So you may find if your outline isn't strong enough or deep enough, if you haven't like scratched a border between one area and the next, then the solvent might streak out of that area. So if you've got a very faint outline like I have here, which is only just a few little pyrography lines to represent the spines, so there's no hard outline, I've got to be careful that solvent doesn't streak out into the background. If you've got a hard outline, like the nose here for example, or even a deep, faint but deep outline, one that's been almost scored with your pen, then that provides a little border from which the solvent or the wood stain can't escape. So let's give it a try. And again, I'm just going to put a little bit of water in that. I'll put some in the cap, put a little bit of water in there. And I'm going to check this on a spare bit of wood just to see how strong that's going to be. I don't want it to be too strong. So again, dilute it a little bit. And it's important to check this first before you put it on, because it can be undiluted wood stain, can be very strong. So we're going to use this for the spines, and just going to paint them on very carefully, go around the ears. I want to leave, ideally, some of the ends of some of the spines pale, and some are going to be quite dark. So I'm not going to just paint the wood stain all over. I'm just going to paint it as if I were painting the spines anyway. Let's take a little bit more water on in there for the next bit. Again, good idea I think just to test it. Make sure it's not too strong. And remember, if you want some variety in the texture in the spines, paint as though they were individual spines rather than just going over the whole lot. And when you get to the edge, which is a soft edge in a sense, not an outline, and start from the outside and just work back in. And if you don't put too much on a soft edge like that, then it shouldn't streak. There you go, and then dilute it even more for finishing touches around the face. It's almost just be dirty water. Take a little bit off on a paper towel next to me. A little bit more, that's it. So this is just going to represent the sort of paler brown fur around the face. And of course what we're seeking to do is just enhance our pyrography drawing. A little bit around the edge of the ear. And you can add more layers of course if you decide you want to create different shades of that darker brown, that mahogany stain, and wait till that first layer is dry and add a little bit more. So I'm going to leave the rest of the face and the chest and belly as the initial wood. That will give him a nice sort of pale touch to his belly and his face. Everything else, as you can see, has got a nice gentle hint of colour to it. The flowers, the leaves, the background, ears, and then finally the hedgehog's spines. So I hope you enjoyed this 3-part tutorial. If you haven't already, check out parts 1 and 2 the wood burning side, and don't forget to subscribe to my YouTube channel for more videos like this, plus many other art tutorials of various mediums. Thanks for watching, and see you next time.